I wanted to talk to begin about the general question of transformation and disruption. What does it mean to face uncertain waters, and what does it mean to be someone who can be a success in a very fast-changing and uncertain world? And when we discuss those topics, when we discuss the question of disruption, generally what we do is we focus on things that people know, right? What do you need to know to be a success in the current marketplace? Or we focus on resources. What kind of support do you need to be a success in the world? But I want to leave those two questions aside and focus instead on attitudes. And that is, how do you need to feel and think to be a success in a disrupted world? When you look at entrepreneurs, as a group, at successful entrepreneurs, you will find a cluster of personality traits, right? Of which disagreeableness is one of them. So in all of the big, and there's been many big studies of successful entrepreneurs, what you discover is that they're quite similar on one level. They are all people who are open, that is to say, who are very creative, who have an ability to see solutions to problems that others don't. They are also people who are highly conscientious. So they're people who are capable of following through on an idea in a detailed, disciplined way. And right away, when you think about those two traits, you can understand why successful entrepreneurs are so rare. There are many people who are creative, and there are many people who are conscientious. It is very hard to find someone who possesses those two traits in combination. But they also need to be somebody who is not reliant on the approval of their peers to do what they think is right? Because time and time again, when you look at the origins of successful businesses, you will see that the rest of the world thought that the entrepreneur and the innovator was crazy. We talk about what it takes to be a great disruptor, a great innovator, and we overlook how much courage it takes to be a great innovator. You know, if there's one thing, I remember once years ago when I was writing my book, Blink, I was talking to a guy who studied marriages and what were the signs you could see in a couple that would help you predict whether they would stay together. And his observation was there was one emotion that more than any other predicted that a marriage was going to fail, and that is contempt. That when you see contempt in the eyes of one member of a married couple, the marriage can't survive. It can survive anger. It can survive all kinds of emotions, negative emotions. It cannot survive contempt. And why is that? Because contempt is the emotion where someone says, I don't want to be a part of you anymore, right? I'm not even willing to even engage you. And the minute we see that in a partner, the partnership can't go on. The marriage can't go on. That's how powerful we need the support and approval of those around us. It's hardwired into us, right? These two really interesting economists named Chris Anderson and David Sally wrote a really interesting book about football. And it was called The Numbers Game. And basically they went through and they asked a series of questions about football and answered them as an economist would answer them. And it's a totally fascinating book. And my favorite chapter in the book is they ask the question, if you are running a football team and you want to make your football team better, are you better off improving your best player or improving your worst player? And their answer is, you're better off improving your worst player. Football is a game that is heavily reliant on mistakes, right? If games are typically 1-0 or 2-0 or 2-1, one mistake can be crucial. It can turn the outcome of an entire game. And so if you think that your worst player is more likely to make a mistake than your best player, then you're better off improving your worst player, right? Secondly, football is fundamentally interactive. Even the greatest football player in the world, even he can't move the ball all by himself from one end to the next. He needs the participation of his teammates, right? And so if everyone has to be involved in order to successfully move the ball around the field, then it matters who your worst player is. If you had 47 amazing passes and one terrible one, it doesn't work. Whole thing falls apart. So just having one player on the field who isn't up to snuff is sufficient to undo the genius and mastery of everyone else. Football is what we would call a weak link game. It is a game where your organization is only as strong as its weakest link. Your weakest links are carrying the load for the strongest links. So it really, really matters how good your weak links are. Now compare that to basketball. Basketball is completely different. First of all, basketball is not a game that's driven by mistakes. Basketball players make mistakes routinely. Doesn't matter. You're scoring so many times that you could make 50 mistakes in a game, and it's not going to turn the outcome of the game. Secondly, basketball is not interactive in the same way. That if the best basketball player in the world decides he wants to move the ball from one end of the court to the next all by himself, he can do that, and no one can stop him. He doesn't require the participation of every one of his teammates in order to score the basketball. Basketball is a strong link sport. Your basketball team is as good as your best player. And when you want to make your basketball team better, what you do is you upgrade your best player, not upgrade your weakest player. Do you know how many people in the United States have top secret security clearance? 854,000. You've gone from monitoring 20 people to monitoring 854,000. That is a completely different game, right? And why is America so bad at it? Because they're still playing basketball. They built these institutions around a model that said 5 people count. And now they're in a world where 854,000 people can hack into your system, right? And they haven't made that adjustment. Why? Because it's hard. Because these institutions were built a century ago, modeled on a world that no longer exists. And to move from playing basketball to football is not something that can happen overnight. And I think that this is only going to become more marked when you think about the transition to the Internet of Things. You know, if the Internet of Things is the next great digital transformation that we're going to be seeing, and some would argue that it's going to be one of the most disruptive of the technological transitions of the modern age. What is that about? That is about bringing connectivity to ordinary devices, to all of these devices that have thus far been left out of the digital equation. That is going to require scale. We're going to need extraordinary numbers of people with the know-how to implement that next stage in our economic development. That's a weak link problem, not a strong link problem. We see that pattern repeated again and again and again with experts. They are very good at what they do, and that makes them confident. And because they are confident, they soon grow overconfident. And because they are overconfident, what do? They make catastrophic errors. What we ask of our leaders in times of crisis too often is the benefit of their expertise, but that's not really what we need from them. What we need from our leaders in times of crisis is the benefit of their humility. What direction are we headed in as a world? Is the digital economy pushing us in a strong link direction or a weak link direction? And I think the digital economy is pushing us in a weak link direction. I think that the net effect of all of the extraordinary technologies that are bubbling up and changes that are happening in all the marketplaces is that we are becoming a world where our principal constraint is how good our weakest players are, not our strongest players are. And it's very easy, if you are yourself the product of a strong link world, to think entirely in strong link terms. But I think one of the secrets to making a successful transition in the coming digital revolution is to understand that the nature of the game that we are all playing has fundamentally changed. We are no longer playing basketball. We are now all playing football. You know, when we talk about the necessary traits of the disruptor and the fact that they need to be courageous, the fact that they need to have imagination and they have to have a sense of urgency, none of those traits are about what's up here, about your knowledge. None of those traits are dependent on the amount of resources and support and backing that you have. All of those traits are about your attitude, right? It's about here, about what's in here that matters ultimately when it comes to being a disruptor, not what's in your wallet or in your mind.